Evan Reed was not having a good day, and honestly, he had not enjoyed a good day in months. He was a human mechanic on a huge alien space station. But now he was broke, hungry, and tired of life pushing him down. He had worked in repair bays all his life, fixing engines, cleaning fuel lines, and tightening bolts. But yesterday, his boss replaced him with a shiny robot. The machine worked faster, never complained, and didn't need money. So Evan was fired without thanks, without warning, without care. Now he walked through bright metal corridors with only 12 credits in his pocket, barely enough for cheap food. He felt invisible in the crowd. Humans were rare here, and most aliens only looked at him with confusion or disrespect. But Evan kept moving, hoping the universe would give him one small break. He stopped outside a busy cafe glowing with neon lights. The smell of freshly cooked food drifted out. Warm and comforting, his stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday. Evan sighed and pushed the door open. Inside, music played softly. Aliens chatted, laughed, and enjoyed their meals. It felt like a different world, one Evan wished he belonged to. He looked around for an empty table. There was only one, placed in the corner. Strangely isolated, no one sat near it. Not even by accident, Evan didn't think much about it. He just wanted somewhere to sit, somewhere to rest his feet and mind. He walked over and dropped into the chair, relieved to finally stop moving. At first, he didn't notice anything strange. But slowly, the cafe began to fall silent. One voice stopped, then another, and another, until the entire room was quietly staring. Evan blinked, confused. Had he done something wrong? Was he sitting in someone else's seat? He turned his head, and that was when he saw her. Across the table sat a young girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, but clearly not human. Her skin shimmered like red polished stone, scales glowing softly under the cafe lights. Small golden horns curled around her head like a crown. Her bright yellow eyes were wide with fear. She was dressed in royal clothing that looked far too expensive for a normal child, and she sat perfectly still. Like a frightened statue, Evan's breath caught. He had seen dragons before, powerful ones. They ruled an entire empire and were feared across galaxies. And this girl looked like she belonged to that empire. Maybe even to the ruling family, but why was she alone? Why was nobody sitting with her? Why did she look so scared? Evan offered her a small, awkward smile, hoping to calm her. She didn't smile back. Instead, she whispered something so quietly he barely heard it. "Please don't leave me." Her hands trembled under the table. Evan felt a strange pull in his chest. He didn't understand what was happening, but he could not ignore a child asking for help. Then he noticed something else. In every corner of the cafe, silent guards stood watching. Their armor was black, thick, and official. But not one of them moved to protect her. They simply observed. Waiting. It felt wrong, terribly wrong. The girl looked like she wanted to run, but couldn't. Evan suddenly felt like he had walked into a trap without seeing it. A group of aliens nearby whispered nervously. One leaned toward him and quietly warned, "Human, leave the table now." Before they come, Evan frowned. Who would come? Why would sitting at a table be dangerous? He almost stood, but then he looked at the girl again. Her eyes were so full of fear that his feet refused to move. He remembered every moment life had ignored him. Every time someone walked away when he needed help. He couldn't do that to her. Not today. Not ever. Evan leaned forward carefully and asked, "Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, tears slowly filled her eyes. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but no sound came out. It looked like she had been crying long before he arrived. Evan felt anger growing inside him. How could a place full of people ignore a scared child? He looked around, demanding answers with his eyes. But everyone looked away, pretending they saw nothing. Pretending they heard nothing outside the cafe window. Bright lights suddenly flashed, followed by a loud humming sound. The floor trembled gently. The crowd gasped in panic. People rushed away from the windows, covering their mouths. Evan turned and saw a massive ship landing. Bigger than the cafe, bigger than most buildings on the station. It was black, sharp, and terrifying. The moment it touched the ground, alarms rang across the plaza. Heavy footsteps echoed like thunder. Soldiers in the same dark armor marched toward the cafe doors. This wasn't normal security. This was a royal arrest squad. Evan felt his heart pound in his chest. They were not here for him. They were here for the girl sitting across from him. She looked at Evan with quiet acceptance, like she already knew she was doomed. Like she expected nobody to care, and in that moment, Evan understood why the table was empty. Why everyone avoided it. Why nobody helped her. Sitting there meant sharing her fate. Sitting there meant danger. Sitting there meant choosing a side. The cafe doors slid open with a sharp hiss. Soldiers filled the entrance, their eyes scanning the room like hunters. Every customer lowered their head, trying to disappear. But Evan didn't look away. He stayed seated, unknowingly making a decision that would change his life forever. The girl whispered again, her voice shaking. "Please stay with me," and Evan realized something. He had finally chosen the wrong table, but maybe, just maybe, it was the most important choice of his life. Evan did not breathe for a moment. His heart still raced from the soldiers entering the cafe. But the small dragon girl across from him was even more terrified. Her hands shook. Her golden eyes never left the door. Her body looked tense, like she was preparing for something terrible. Evan wanted to speak, but his throat felt dry. He had never been this close to a royal bloodline before. And he didn't even know her name yet. The soldiers scanned the room slowly. Their helmets reflected the cafe lights. Their armor looked heavy, sharp, and expensive. Every step they took echoed like a warning to everyone inside. People lowered their heads, pretending to be invisible. Even the cafe owner hid behind the counter. Nobody wanted to be noticed. Nobody wanted trouble. Evan understood now. This wasn't just a patrol. This was a hunt. And the target was sitting right in front of him. The girl whispered something under her breath, so quiet only Evan heard it. "They found me." Her voice was soft, filled with defeat, like she had been running for a long time. Evan leaned forward, still confused but unable to walk away. "Why are they after you?" he asked gently. The girl looked down at her hands. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she wiped her eyes quickly, trying not to cry, like she had practiced hiding her emotions too many times before. "My name is Lyra," she finally whispered. "Lyra Emberflame." Evan frowned. The name sounded familiar. Then his eyes widened. Emberflame was the ruling family of the Dragon Empire. The most powerful empire in 3 galaxies, if she carried that name. Then she wasn't just important, she was royal. Not just royal, she might be the Emperor's daughter. Evan suddenly understood the fear in the room. He wasn't sitting with a random dragon child. He was sitting with the most dangerous child in the galaxy. Before he could react, Lyra continued. "Please don't leave me," she pleaded. "Everyone leaves." Evan felt something painful inside his chest. He remembered being abandoned by employers. Friends, strangers, he knew that feeling too well. But her loneliness was heavier, deeper, and far more dangerous. "I won't leave," Evan said quietly, not because he was brave, but because he could not stand the thought of failing her. The soldiers spread out, blocking every exit. One of them stepped forward and spoke loudly. "Nobody move." His voice was cold and commanding. Almost everyone froze. A few customers cried softly. No one dared ask questions. Evan tried to stay calm. But he could feel the universe shifting around him. He knew if they discovered Lyra sitting with a human stranger, they might arrest him too, or worse. He swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how fragile his life was. Lyra grabbed his sleeve with trembling fingers. "They want to take me back," she whispered, "but if I go, I will die." Evan stared at her, shocked. She wasn't running from enemies, she was running from her own home. "Why?" he asked, trying not to raise his voice. Lyra opened her mouth to answer, but her words broke apart. Like she was afraid the walls themselves were listening, her small shoulders shook. And she looked like a child desperately holding a heavy secret. Across the room, the lead soldier lifted a scanner. It beeped as it moved from table to table. Evan felt Lyra's grip tighten. She looked like she might faint. He wanted to protect her, but how could a hungry, broke mechanic fight royal soldiers in full armor? He didn't even have a toolkit with him. All he had was his instinct. One of the cafe customers slowly stood, fear controlling every movement. "She's not here," the alien lied nervously. "We haven't seen the princess." Evan was surprised. Someone was brave enough to defend her, but the soldier didn't believe it. He slammed the scanner on the table angrily. "If anyone hides her, they will be punished by the Empire," he warned. "We will destroy everything you own." The room fell silent again. Fear filled every corner like smoke. Lyra lowered her head. "They don't help me anymore," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Everyone is afraid of my uncle." Evan blinked. Uncle. Suddenly the story changed shape. This wasn't a normal search. This felt like a political battle, a royal struggle for power. Lyra's uncle must want the throne. Lyra's uncle must want the throne, and removing the emperor's daughter would make everything easier for him. Evan felt sick, a child trapped in an adult war, alone. Hunted, ignored, the scanner beeped louder and louder. It was close now, only one table away. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, as if already expecting pain. Evan made a choice without thinking. He reached across the table, grabbed a dirty cafe menu, and lifted it in front of her face like a shield. It was a ridiculous plan, but it was all he had. He lounged back in his chair, pretending to be relaxed, pretending Lyra was not there. The soldiers scanned the table. The device word beeped. And then, nothing, no alarm, no signal, no discovery. Somehow, it did not register Lyra's presence. Evan exhaled slowly, shocked at the miracle. The soldiers moved on. But the danger was not gone. They remained inside. Watching, waiting, hunting. Lyra opened her eyes again, confused. "Why did you help me?" she whispered. Evan looked at her, confused by his own actions. He didn't know her. Protecting her could destroy his life. But when he saw her fear, something inside him refused to abandon her. "Because you asked me to," he answered softly. Lyra stared at him like nobody had ever given her that answer before. Outside, the giant black ship powered up again. Louder than before, soldiers began speaking into communication devices, preparing for the next phase of the search. Evan realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. It was only beginning, and whether he liked it or not, he was now part of it. Lyra sat across from him, small, scared, and royal, looking at him with the last hope she had left in the universe. Evan swallowed hard, understanding the weight of her silent request. His life was about to change forever, and the universe wasn't going to give him a choice. Evan felt like time had stopped inside the cafe. Lyra still held his sleeve, her small claws barely touching his skin. But the fear in her eyes was louder than any alarm. The soldiers continued searching, scanning tables, questioning customers, and growing more impatient with every second. Evan knew they would not leave until they found her. And once they found her, they would take him too. Simply because he sat beside her. He needed to think, and he needed to think fast. His mind raced through every repair job he had ever done, every tunnel, vent, and maintenance hatch he had ever crawled through. Then he remembered something important. Emergency service ducts ran right behind the cafe kitchen. Hidden from public view, they were small, dirty, and not meant for escaping, but they existed, and right now, they were the only hope. He leaned closer to Lyra, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "We need to leave now," she blinked, shocked. "But the doors," Evan shook his head. "We're not using doors." He stood up slowly, pretending he was just going to the restroom. He didn't want to attract attention. Lyra followed, keeping her head down. Her steps were quiet, but her tail trembled with fear. The soldiers didn't notice them at first. The cafe was busy, noisy, and chaotic. Evan guided her toward the kitchen entrance. Hoping nobody would stop them, a tired alien cook looked up. Confused, Evan forced a polite smile. "Repair inspection," he lied. "Emergency order," the cook shrugged, not wanting trouble, and waved them through. Evan couldn't believe that worked, but there was no time to celebrate. The kitchen smelled like burnt oil and spicy noodles. Steam hissed from metal pots. Workers rushed back and forth. Too busy to notice two unexpected visitors, Evan scanned the room quickly until he found a rusty panel near the floor. Exactly where he remembered. He knelt down and began loosening the screws with his fingers. They were old, weak, and badly maintained, so they came off easily. Lyra crouched beside him, staring with wide eyes. "How do you know all this?" she asked. Evan gave a half smile. "Because fixing things is the only thing I'm good at." He pulled the panel away, revealing a narrow, dark vent. The metal was cold and dusty, but it was just wide enough for them. "Go," he whispered. Lyra hesitated. She had been raised in palaces, surrounded by gold, guards, and luxury. Crawling into a dirty maintenance vent was not something princesses usually did. But survival didn't care about status. She took a deep breath, then crawled inside. Evan followed right behind her, pulling the panel back into place. The darkness swallowed them instantly. The air inside the vent was tight and heavy. Evan's shoulders scraped the metal walls with every movement. Lyra crawled ahead, her breath shaky but determined. The sound of soldiers shouting echoed faintly behind the panel. They had reached the kitchen. They were asking questions. Someone must have told them Lyra left her table. Evan felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He pushed forward faster, wanting as much distance as possible. The vent sloped downward, turning left, then right, creating a confusing maze. Evan had worked on this station for years, so he understood its skeleton better than most. But even he knew escaping would not be easy. Lyra winced suddenly. Evan froze. "What's wrong?" he whispered. She touched her side gently. "I fell before coming to the cafe," she admitted. "I think something is broken." Evan swallowed hard. He wished he had medical tools. He wished he had anything useful. "Can you keep going?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded bravely, even though her breathing grew uneven. They continued crawling, but now Evan slowed down, making sure she didn't struggle too much. He admired her strength. Most adults would have given up. But she kept moving, step by painful step. Then a loud metallic clang echoed through the vent. Evan stopped instantly. Soldiers were opening panels, searching maintenance shafts. They must have realized Lyra escaped through the cafe kitchen. "They're coming," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Evan looked behind them, seeing faint beams of red scanning lights. They needed a distraction, something loud, something chaotic, something that would slow the soldiers down. And suddenly, Evan had an idea, a stupid, dangerous, and risky idea. He turned around and crawled backward toward a service junction box. He opened it with shaking hands, wires sparking faintly. He twisted a few connections, rewired a circuit, and sent a surge of power through a cleaning bot maintenance station above them. A second later, a loud explosion shook the cafe kitchen. Buckets flew, water burst from pipes. Steam filled the room, workers screamed, alarms blared. Soldiers panicked and shouted orders. The chaos bought Evan and Lyra valuable time. How did you do that? Lyra asked, amazed. Evan smirked weakly. I break things as well as I fix them. They kept crawling until they reached a larger maintenance chamber, where they could finally sit upright. Both of them gasped for breath. Lyra wiped sweat from her forehead. Thank you, she whispered. Evan shook his head. We're not safe yet. Suddenly, a holographic screen flickered on inside the chamber. It displayed Evan's face beside a list of charges. Wanted, human accomplice to royal kidnapping. A bounty amount flashed beneath it. More money than Evan had ever seen. Lyra stared at the screen, horrified. They think you stole me. Evan laughed bitterly. Great. Now everyone will be looking for us. For the first time since meeting her, Lyra looked angry instead of afraid. I won't let them hurt you, she said. Evan stared at her, speechless. She was the most powerful child in the galaxy. Yet she worried about a broke mechanic who had nothing. Except heart. Except courage. Except loyalty. Alarms echoed deeper into the vents. Growing louder, soldiers were still hunting. And every exit outside was probably blocked now. Evan stood, determination replacing fear. We need to get off this station, he said. Lyra nodded, trusting him completely. A broke human mechanic and a dragon princess. Crawling through shadows, running from an empire. But the universe didn't expect them. The empire didn't believe in them. And that was their advantage. They began moving again. Unaware that this escape was only the first step of a much bigger war. A war neither of them asked for. But one they would soon have to fight together. Evan and Lyra kept moving through the narrow vent tunnels. Their hands and knees were scraped. Their clothes dirty, but stopping meant getting caught. The alarms echoing through the metal walls felt like a countdown. Every second mattered. Lyra tried to stay strong. But Evan noticed her breathing getting weaker. He slowed down a little, letting her rest. She didn't complain, though. She didn't want to become a burden. But Evan already saw the pain she was hiding. They finally reached a wider maintenance bay. Large pipes and humming machines surrounded them. The air smelled like oil and hot metal. Evan helped Lyra sit down gently on a crate. She winced but stayed quiet. He studied her carefully. He saw dried blood on her side, a deep bruise hidden beneath her clothes. You're hurt worse than you said, Evan whispered. Lyra looked down, ashamed. I didn't want you to leave, she admitted. Evan shook his head. I wouldn't have. His voice was soft but firm. And Lyra's eyes filled with silent gratitude. He tore a piece of his sleeve and wrapped it around her wound. It wasn't perfect, but it stopped the bleeding. Lyra watched him work, surprised by how gentle he was. Most people treated her like a symbol, not a person. But Evan treated her like a child who needed help. You don't even know me, she whispered. Evan tied the cloth and looked at her. I know you're scared. And that's enough, Lyra blinked. Processing those words she had never heard from anyone, except maybe her father, back when life was still safe. A loud voice boomed through the station speakers. Attention citizens. Princess Lyra Emberflame has been kidnapped by a human mechanic. Evan rolled his eyes. Kidnapped, really? Lyra flinched at her title being spoken publicly. He controls dangerous explosive devices, the voice continued. Report him immediately. Evan let out a frustrated breath. Great. Now I'm a criminal mastermind. Lyra's expression changed. Shifting from fear to confusion. They are lying on purpose. Evan studied her. Why though? Why blame me? Lyra hesitated. Her throat tightening, but she finally answered. Because my uncle needs someone to blame. Evan's eyes narrowed. Your uncle is behind all this. Lyra nodded slowly. He wants the throne, she explained. My father, the emperor, is sick, and if I disappear, my uncle becomes the next ruler. Evan felt cold anger spread through him. A political war disguised as a rescue mission. A child hunted so a man could gain power. Does anyone know the truth? Evan asked. Lyra shook her head. Most were forced to stay silent. The rest were afraid. Evan understood now why the guards in the cafe didn't help her. Helping meant dying. Staying silent meant surviving. Lyra hugged her knees, looking smaller than ever. "I thought if I ran far enough, someone would protect me," she said weakly. "But no one did." Evan sat beside her. "Not too close, giving her space." "Someone did," he reminded her. Lyra looked up slowly, tears shining in her eyes. "You," she whispered. Evan shrugged, trying to hide how deeply those words hit him. "I'm just a mechanic," but Lyra shook her head. "You're the only one who chose to stay," before Evan could respond. A distant rumble shook the maintenance bay. Heavy footsteps echoed through connecting tunnels. Soldiers were spreading out, widening the search. They had minutes at most. Evan stood quickly, scanning the room for exits. He spotted a ladder leading up to a locked hatch. It connected to old repair docks, long abandoned and off the security grid. "We're going up," he said. Lyra nodded. Trusting him without question, he climbed first. Then helped her follow. She struggled, her injury slowing her down, but she didn't give up. That determination impressed Evan more than anything. When he pushed the hatch open, a wave of cool, dusty air hit them. The room above was dark and empty, old tools scattered on the ground, flickering lights hanging from the ceiling. "Nobody uses this place," Evan explained. "Because everything up here is broken." Lyra gave a tired smile. "Lucky for us you like broken things," Evan chuckled quietly. "It's a hobby." But deep inside, he already felt responsible for her safety, not because she was royal, but because she was a child who deserved better. They walked deeper into the abandoned dock. Evan searched for supplies, hoping for anything useful. He found an old communication console and wiped the dust off. It flickered to life weakly. Lyra watched him curiously. "Who are you contacting?" Evan sighed. "Someone who owes me a favor." He opened a private channel. The screen displayed a familiar face, a grumpy alien pilot named Relo. "Evan," Relo groaned. "I'm not lending you money again." Evan shook his head. "Not money, I need a ship," Relo laughed. "You can't even afford fuel." Evan leaned forward seriously. "It's for a child." He moved aside so the screen could see Lyra. When Relo recognized her, his face drained of color. "Are you insane?" he whisper-shouted. "That's the Emperor's daughter," Evan nodded. "And she needs help." Relo looked around nervously, terrified. "Do you know what the Empire will do if I assist you?" Evan stared at him, calm but firm. "Do you know what will happen to her if we don't?" The silence stretched. Relo swallowed hard, shifting between fear and conscience. Finally, he closed his eyes, sighed, and whispered, "Dock 11. 10 minutes. The screen went dark. Evan turned to Lyra. "We have a chance." Lyra's eyes filled with cautious hope. "Why would he help?" Evan shrugged. "Because not everyone is a coward." Suddenly, loud clanging echoed from the ladder below. Soldiers had found the maintenance bay. Evan grabbed Lyra's hand. "Time to run." They sprinted through the abandoned dock. Lyra limping but determined, Evan supporting her as best as he could. Red emergency lights began flashing. Doors started sealing shut automatically. They just barely slid through one before it locked behind them. Every hallway felt like a narrowing throat, pushing them toward destiny or disaster. When they reached the final sliding door, Evan stopped, breathing hard. Lyra stared at him, confused. "Why did you help me?" she asked again. He looked at her, tired but unbroken. "Because someone should." And before she could respond, the door opened, revealing Dock 11 and a future none of them expected. Evan and Lyra stood inside Dock 11. The old hangar was dark, silent, and filled with broken ships that looked like forgotten skeletons. Dust floated through the air like tiny ghosts. Lyra stared at everything with wide eyes. She had never seen a place so abandoned, so unloved. Evan checked the shadows carefully. making sure no soldiers had followed them. For the first time since the cafe, they had a few seconds to breathe. But safety never lasted long on this station. A small cargo ship appeared from the darkness, its engines whispering. The door opened slowly, and Rilo stepped out. His eyes darted nervously between Evan and Lyra. "I can't believe I'm doing this," he muttered. Evan gave a tired smile. "Thank you," Rilo raised a hand. "Don't thank me yet. The Empire is already locking down exits." Lyra stepped forward politely. "I am grateful," Rilo froze, staring at her like she was a fragile bomb. "Yeah, okay. But please don't breathe fire in my ship." Evan almost laughed. Lyra actually smiled a little, but their moment of calm ended instantly. A loud alarm echoed through the hangar. Red lights flashed. The huge metal doors began sliding shut. Trapping them inside, Evan shouted, "They found us!" Rilo panicked. "I told you this was a bad idea." Evan grabbed Lyra's hand and ran toward the cargo ship. But before they reached it, dozens of armored soldiers stormed into the hangar. Their boots hit the ground like falling hammers. Their weapons glowed with dangerous energy. Evan stopped moving. His heart pounded. He positioned himself in front of Lyra without thinking, protecting her with his own body. The lead soldier pointed at him. "Human. Surrender." Evan didn't move. Rilo raised his hands slowly, hoping they would ignore him. The soldiers spread around the hangar, cutting off escape routes. Lyra trembled. But she refused to hide behind Evan. She stood beside him, even though fear shook her small body. The lead soldier continued, "Hand over the princess, and your death will be quick." Evan felt anger rise in his chest. They didn't even pretend she mattered. They didn't treat her like a child, just a tool for power. Evan spoke calmly. "She's injured. She needs help." The soldier laughed. "She doesn't need help. She needs to disappear." Lyra flinched at those words. Evan clenched his fists. He had no weapon, no armor, no plan. But he refused to give her up. The soldier ordered, "Take them." The troops moved like a wave. But Evan reacted faster than he ever had in his life. He grabbed a loose metal pipe from the floor and swung it at the nearest soldier. The hit landed on the soldier's helmet. Sparks flying, the soldier fell backward in shock. Everyone froze, confused that a broke mechanic dared to fight an empire. Rilo cursed loudly and ran back into his ship. Evan wasn't offended. He understood fear. More soldiers advanced, but Evan wasn't running. He pulled a toolbox from a broken ship nearby and threw it at another soldier. The tools exploded across the floor, making soldiers trip and lose balance. Lyra gasped. Impressed and terrified at the same time, Evan shouted, "Get behind something." But Lyra stayed close. She refused to leave him alone. The soldiers raised their rifles, preparing to fire. Evan grabbed a fuel hose from the wall and yanked it free. A stream of dark liquid sprayed across the floor, forming a large, slippery puddle. Soldiers stepped onto it, and their metal boots slid uncontrollably, several falling hard. The others stumbled. Trying not to fall, Evan didn't stop. He grabbed a loose power cable and sparked it. The electricity ignited the fuel, creating a sudden line of fire between him and the soldiers. They backed away, shocked and blinded by the bright flames. Lyra stared at him in awe. "How do you know all this?" she whispered. Evan breathed heavily. "Panels, engines, pipes. I've been fixing things here for years." A soldier managed to get around the fire and charged toward them. Evan raised the metal pipe again, ready to fight. But something unexpected happened. Lyra stepped in front of him. Her hands shook. Golden sparks danced around her throat. She tried to breathe fire, but only a weak puff of smoke escaped. Her injury had weakened her powers. The soldier laughed. Raising his weapon, Evan did not think. He tackled the soldier with everything he had. They rolled across the floor, metal clashing against metal. Evan fought wildly, fueled by desperation. The soldier swung his armored fist, hitting Evan in the jaw. Pain exploded in Evan's head, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a loose wire and jammed it into the soldier's armor. The suit short-circuited. Sparks flying violently, the soldier collapsed. Stunned and twitching, Lyra watched, stunned. She had seen soldiers, warriors, guards, but she had never seen courage that came from nothing. From no power, from no status, just heart. More soldiers pushed forward. Ignoring the fire, Evan stood again. Bleeding, exhausted, but unbroken, Lyra's breathing grew faster. She covered her chest, overwhelmed with guilt. "This is my fault," she whispered. Evan shook his head firmly. "No, it's your uncle's fault." The soldiers aimed their rifles again. Evan knew he couldn't stop energy blasts with a pipe. He prepared for the worst. Rilo suddenly appeared inside the ship's doorway. Waving frantically, "Get in now." Evan grabbed Lyra and ran. Dragging her as fast as he could, the soldiers fired. But the shots hit the metal floor. Missing them by inches, they reached the ramp. But before Evan stepped inside, he looked back. The soldiers were regrouping. Preparing to fire again, Evan slammed his fist into a nearby control panel. The hangar's overhead cranes jerked to life, swinging wildly. One crane dropped a massive engine casing right in front of the soldiers, blocking their advance. The soldiers shouted in frustration. Evan smiled proudly. "Still got it." Rilo hit the launch button. The cargo ship roared, lifting off. Soldiers ran toward it, firing desperately. But they were too late. The ship shot upward, smashing through the hangar roof, debris falling behind them. Lyra pressed her hand against the window. Watching the station shrink below, tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Not from fear this time, but from disbelief. Someone actually fought for her. Someone chose her, even when it cost everything. Evan leaned back against the wall, exhausted, bruised. And breathing heavily, Lyra turned to him. Her voice small but full of emotion. "Why do you keep saving me?" Evan looked at her, eyes tired but sincere. "Because nobody else would." The ship flew into open space. But none of them knew the Empire wasn't finished. In fact, the real battle was only beginning. And the entire galaxy was about to watch it unfold. The cargo ship raced through open space, leaving the station and its burning hangar far behind. Evan sat on the floor, bruised, bleeding. And shaking from adrenaline, Lyra sat beside him, still holding onto his arm like she feared he might disappear. Rilo piloted in silence, too afraid to speak. Every few seconds he checked sensors, scanning for pursuit ships. But the screen remained empty. For now, they were safe. Or at least safer than before. Evan finally exhaled, his chest rising and falling slowly. "We made it," he said. Lyra didn't smile. She looked out the window, watching distant stars blur into streaks. "He won't stop," she whispered. Evan didn't have to ask who. Her uncle had the soldiers, the power, and the Empire behind him. They were fugitives now, hunted across galaxies. Evan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was just a mechanic yesterday, fixing engines and saving loose screws. Now he was protecting a princess, running from an empire, and wanted for kidnapping. The universe had changed too fast. Rilo finally broke the silence. "I can't outrun warships forever," he said. "We need a plan." Evan rubbed his aching jaw. "We need someone who will believe us." Lyra looked at him with tired hope. "My father," she whispered. Evan's eyes widened. "The Emperor," Lyra nodded slowly. "He's sick, but he's still alive. My uncle controls the Empire. But he does not control my father." Rilo's eyes almost popped out. "You want me to fly into dragon territory?" Evan shrugged. "It's the only chance we have," Rilo groaned loudly. "I should have stayed in bed today." But he changed course anyway. Hours passed. The stars outside grew brighter. larger and more golden. Soon an enormous planet appeared, a swirling mix of crimson clouds and glowing lava streaks. "Dragon Prime," Lyra said softly. Evan stared, amazed. The planet looked like a living heart floating in space. Surrounded by thousands of royal ships, their wings were shaped like ancient dragons. Sharp and intimidating, the closer they got. The more alarms echoed through the cockpit. Relo panicked. "We're being scanned," a robotic voice ordered. "Unidentified ship, prepare to be boarded." Before they could react, massive golden claws extended from a docking ring and locked around their ship. Dragging them inside, Relo muttered, "We are dead." Evan didn't disagree. The moment the cargo ship landed inside the royal hangar, soldiers surrounded them, but these soldiers looked different. Their armor was bright gold, not black. Their movements were controlled. Disciplined, not cruel. Still, they aimed weapons at the ramp. Waiting, Evan lifted his hands slowly, signaling peace. Lyra stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Stand down." "I am Princess Lyra Emberflame." The soldiers looked stunned. Some dropped to their knees instantly, but others hesitated. "Your Highness," one said cautiously, "we were told you were kidnapped." Lyra pointed at Evan. "He saved me," before the soldiers could respond. A heavy door slid open, and an older dragon figure entered. His scales were silver, glowing with ancient power. His steps echoed across the hangar like thunder. He stared at Lyra, then at Evan. His eyes were sharp enough to cut metal. "Bring them," he ordered. They were escorted through shining palace halls filled with floating lanterns and carved marble dragons. Lyra kept close to Evan, her hand clutching his sleeve again. Finally, they reached a massive chamber where a huge crystal throne sat, and on it, surrounded by healers and machines, sat the Dragon Emperor. His scales were faded, his breathing weak, but his presence was powerful enough to fill the entire room. His eyes opened slowly the moment he sensed Lyra. "My daughter," he whispered. Lyra ran to him, tears falling freely. He placed a trembling hand on her cheek. "I thought I lost you." Evan stood at a respectful distance, unsure if he should bow or leave. The Emperor noticed him and studied him like a puzzle. "Who is this human?" he asked. Soldiers began to speak, but Lyra interrupted. "He protected me. He fought soldiers. He risked his life." The Emperor raised a hand, silencing everyone. His voice grew colder. "Did he take you from the station? Did he hide you?" Lyra's eyes widened. "No, But the Emperor interrupted. "Remove the human." Soldiers grabbed Evan instantly. Evan didn't resist. He had expected this. Why would an emperor trust a stranger? Especially a human mechanic. Lyra panicked. "Wait, father. You don't understand." But nobody listened. Evan was dragged toward the exit. His heart sank. He wanted to defend himself. Shout, explain. But what could he say to a ruler of galaxies? Before the doors closed, Lyra screamed. "He saved my life." The chamber froze. The Emperor slowly turned his head. His eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "Explain," he commanded. Lyra ran to Evan, blocking the soldiers. "Uncle sent soldiers to kill me, not to rescue me," the room gasped. Healers stared, guards stiffened. The Emperor's expression shifted from confusion to horror to rage. He looked at Evan again, this time not as a threat but as a witness. "Is this true?" he asked. Evan nodded quietly. "She was alone, scared. Nobody helped her. So I did." The Emperor's gaze softened. It was a slow shift, but powerful. "And what do you ask in return?" he demanded. Evan blinked, confused. "Nothing." The Emperor was stunned. Most beings begged for gold, power, land. But Evan only shook his head. "She's a child. She deserved protection." Lyra grabbed Evan's hand proudly. "I told you he's different." Before the Emperor could respond, palace alarms erupted. The room shook. A guard rushed in. "Your Majesty, enemy warships are approaching." Lyra's face turned pale. "It's him," she whispered. The Emperor closed his eyes, filled with pain and fury. "My brother has come to finish what he started." Evan stepped forward, even though he was surrounded by soldiers. "Then let me help." The Emperor stared at him, surprised again. "You are only a mechanic." Evan shook his head. "Exactly. I know machines better than anyone. And your ships need someone who fights like he has nothing to lose." Lyra squeezed his hand, hope returning to her eyes, and for the first time in a long time. The Emperor nodded, not as a ruler, but as a father accepting a miracle he never expected outside. Engines roared and war drums echoed through the sky. The uncle had come for the throne, but he had no idea a human was waiting to rewrite the ending. The battle for the Empire was about to begin, and this time, humanity would not watch from the sidelines. The palace shook again, dust falling from the ceiling, outside. Thunderous explosions echoed across Dragon Prime's sky. Lyra held Evan's arm tightly, her golden eyes full of fear and determination. The Emperor struggled to stand, but his weakened body trembled. He looked at Evan, not as a human, not as a stranger, but as the only person willing to fight for his daughter without wanting anything in return. "Go," the Emperor whispered. "Protect her. Protect our people." Evan nodded, feeling a weight heavier than any tool he had ever lifted. Soldiers guided them through long glowing hallways filled with ancient carvings of past rulers. Lyra limped slightly, still injured. Evan stayed beside her, supporting her carefully. Outside the palace doors, the sky burned red. Enemy warships filled the atmosphere like a swarm of angry insects. Their black armor reflected fire and destruction. Evan had never seen anything so terrifying. "That's your uncle's fleet," he asked quietly. Lyra nodded, her voice trembling. "He wants to erase us." Relo, who somehow convinced a palace guard to let him stay, met them near a massive hangar. "You owe me forever," he muttered. Evan almost smiled but couldn't. Too much was at stake. Inside the hangar stood enormous dragon-shaped starships. Their wings spread wide, covered in golden scales of metal, but half of them were dark, offline, damaged. Evan rushed toward the nearest one, opening a maintenance panel. "Who worked on these?" he demanded. A nervous engineer replied, "We tried, but they're too old. They won't power up." Evan examined the engine core. "Wires and cooling system." He shook his head. "They will." "You're just thinking like a soldier, not a mechanic." Lyra watched him with amazement and hope. Evan grabbed tools, pulling out fried circuits, reconnecting forgotten energy relays. His hands moved fast, almost instinctively. Sparks flew, engines hummed, lights flickered back to life. One ship roared like a waking dragon. The engineers gasped. "How did you do that?" Evan wiped oil from his cheek. "Sometimes things just need someone to believe they still work." Lyra smiled softly, knowing he meant more than machines. Suddenly, the hangar doors blasted open. Enemy soldiers stormed in. Their armor was the same black metal that haunted her nightmares. Lyra stepped back in fear. Evan grabbed a metal wrench and stood in front of her, ready to fight with the only weapon he understood. Relo groaned. "You're impossible," then picked up a dropped blaster. The palace guards formed a defensive line. The uncle's soldiers shouted, "Surrender the princess." Evan answered before anyone else. "Come take her." The battle erupted instantly. Blasters fired. Sparks exploded across the floor. Evan swung his wrench, disabling an enemy helmet. Relo fired from behind a crate. Covering him, Lyra crouched low, trying not to faint from pain. One soldier charged toward her. Evan reacted without thinking. He rushed forward and tackled the soldier. They rolled across the floor. The soldier reached for his weapon, but Evan slammed the wrench onto the power cell, disabling it. Guards dragged the soldier away. Evan stood again, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. He looked exhausted but unstoppable. Then the Emperor's voice echoed through the palace speakers. To all loyal citizens of Dragon Prime, stand with your true heir. Protect Princess Lyra, for the first time. The entire planet heard the truth. People poured into the streets, roaring with anger toward the traitor. The uncle's fleet outside fired again, shaking the palace. Evan knew they couldn't hide anymore. He looked at Lyra. It's time to fly, Lyra nodded firmly. With you. Soldiers opened the doors to the newly repaired warship. Evan helped Lyra climb aboard. Rilo hesitated. I hate everything about this. But fine, and followed them. Evan sat in the pilot's seat. Even though he had never flown a warship in his life, Lyra watched nervously. Do you know how to fly this? Evan grinned weakly. No. But I know how not to crash engines. He pressed buttons, flipped switches, and the ship powered on with a mighty roar. The glowing wings unfolded. The hangar floor vibrated beneath them. Outside, enemy warships prepared to destroy the palace. Evan pushed the throttle forward. The dragon ship shot into the sky like a burning comet. The enemy fleet immediately turned toward them. Dozens of deadly ships aimed weapons at Evan's ship. Lyra's heart raced. We can't fight them all. Evan smiled faintly. Who said we're fighting alone? He activated the ship's signal relay. A deep rumble filled the air, one by one behind him. Every repaired warship rose from the hangar, golden wings spreading across the sky. Dragon Prime answered its princess. The enemy fleet launched a massive attack. Evan dodged blasts, flipping the ship in risky turns. Rilo screamed. You're going to kill us. Evan laughed breathlessly. Not today. Lyra watched him with awe. He wasn't a trained pilot, but he flew like someone who had everything to lose and refused to lose it. The repaired fleet formed a shield around them, blocking enemy fire. The battle lit up the sky like fireworks. The uncle's fleet began to fall back, unprepared for a rebellion led by a human. Suddenly, a giant warship appeared, darker and larger than the rest, the command ship. My uncle is on that vessel, Lyra whispered. Evan didn't hesitate. Then that's where we end this. He flew straight toward it. Soldiers in the palace watched from balconies, cheering, believing in their princess again. The enemy ship fired a massive cannon blast. Evan swerved, barely dodging it. Hold on, he warned, and aimed for the weak spot he noticed in the engine shield. With perfect timing, he fired the ship's cannons. The blast struck the engine core, exploding into bright flames. The massive ship broke apart, falling silent in space. The battlefield suddenly went quiet. The remaining enemy ships stopped firing. Soldiers surrendered. The war was over, not by royal armies, not by political negotiations, but because one human refused to leave a scared child alone. Evan slowly returned the warship to the palace platform. People were already gathering, cheering, crying. Lyra stepped out first. The entire crowd knelt before her, honoring their rightful princess. The Emperor appeared, supported by guards. His voice carried strength again. The Empire lives because of a human. He looked at Evan proudly. Kneel. Evan blinked, confused. Me, the Emperor nodded. You protected what even armies could not. Lyra grabbed Evan's hand, refusing to let go. He is family, she declared. The crowd gasped. Evan's eyes widened. Family, he repeated softly. The Emperor smiled. Then let it be known across the galaxy. Evan Reed of Earth is guardian to Princess Lyra Emberflame. People cheered so loudly the sky seemed to shake. Evan felt something warm in his chest, a feeling he had never known before. Belonging. The Emperor offered wealth, ranks, land, but Evan shook his head. I don't want anything. Lyra squeezed his hand. Smiling, the Emperor nodded, understanding. Then you may stay by her side, for as long as you wish. Evan looked at Lyra, and she whispered, You chose the wrong table. He laughed softly. No. I chose the right one. They stood together as the sun rose over Dragon Prime. A broke mechanic no longer invisible, a princess no longer alone, and a galaxy that would forever remember the human who changed everything.